Most personal finance advice talks about emergency funds like it's a rule. Everyone needs one. Do this before you invest. Save 3 to 6 months. And that's true, but it's also incomplete because an emergency fund isn't really about emergencies. It's about having options when life doesn't go as planned. And life usually doesn't go as planned. If you've ever felt like saving for emergencies felt impossible or pointless or even completely out of reach, this video is for you. We're not going to talk about emergency funds as a checkbox. We're going to talk about what they're actually for. I understand that the topic of emergency funds can be a bit sensitive because if money is tight, saving for later can feel impossible when you need that money right now. And most advice doesn't acknowledge that. It quietly assumes that you have extra income, your expenses are predictable, you're not constantly reaching for life or reacting to life. So when someone says just save $1,000 and you're barely covering rent, I understand it doesn't feel helpful because it feels like you're already behind. But here's the thing most people don't say aloud. Emergency funds aren't about hitting a number. They're about reducing how fragile your life really feels. So what is an emergency fund? Well, an emergency fund doesn't prevent bad things from happening, but it does stop one bad thing from turning into 5. For example, a flat tire is still annoying, a surprise bill still stressful, but with a buffer like an emergency fund, it doesn't spiral into overdraft fees, credit card debt, and that familiar knot in your chest. I think of emergency funds as less of protection and more shock absorbers. They don't smooth out the road, they just keep the bumps from knocking you over. And early on, this matters more than almost anything else. So instead of one intimidating goal, I like to think of emergency funds in levels because where you are right now matters. Level 1, the pause button. This one is small and it's the most important. The pause button is just enough money to give you time to think instead of panic. And that might look like $300 to $500, 1 month bare minimum expenses, or simply enough to avoid fees. This fund isn't about security, it's about breathing room. If this is all you have, you're not failing, you're building stability. That brings us to level 2, the stability fund. Now this is where life starts to feel a little less reactive, usually around 1 to 3 months of essential expenses, and this covers job gaps, medical costs, unexpected travel, the stuff that used to derail everything. Money still matters here, but it stops yelling at you all the time. And finally, level 3, the optionality fund. This is what people usually mean when they say emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses, sometimes more, but here's the shift. This fund isn't just for emergencies. It's what lets you leave a job, say no to something that doesn't feel right, take a calculated risk. This is where money starts creating choice, not just protection. So in terms of where to keep it, I'll keep it simple. Your emergency fund should be easy to access, safe, and boring. For most people, a high-yield savings account works perfectly. For me, I keep my emergency fund in a money market fund, and I choose it for the same reasons. It's liquid, low risk, and I can get to it quickly if I need to, but it's also just separate enough that I'm not tempted to touch it day to day. And that's really the point. This money isn't here to grow impressively. It's not even there to be optimized. It should not be invested in the market, locked up, trying to earn impressive returns. This money has one job: to be there on a bad day, not to perform on a good one. So whether that's a high yield savings account or a money market, the right place is the one that gives you the most trust and the least friction. So where do you start if money feels tight? Well, if saving feels impossible right now, let's start with a gentler question. What would make the next problem slightly less painful? Not perfect or optimal, just less fragile. So that might mean $10 at a time, or saving any refunds or windfalls, automating an account that you barely notice. Because here's the part most people underestimate: progress here is going to be emotional before it's mathematical. Once you experience the relief of having any buffer, your relationship with money shifts. You stop reacting and you start choosing. Emergency funds aren't about fear. They're about self-trust. They say, I don't control everything, but I'm preparing to meet it. And that's a quiet kind of wealth most people don't talk about enough, because stability creates inner peace, and that peace within yourself makes everything truly possible. If this helped, tell me where you're starting from: the pause button, the stability fund, or the optionality fund. I'll see you in the next one.